A survey conducted by wealth management firm UBS in September found that investors favored US President Donald Trump for economic direction and job growth. However, Democratic candidate Joe Biden was their pick to manage the COVID-19 downturn, foreign policy and healthcare. Just over a month later, and so much has happened, from a presidential debate that some have called disastrous,
stand back and stand by,
to the president himself contracting COVID-19 and returning to the campaign just days later. Market watchers say that these events may have changed investors' opinion on the ground.
Goldman Sachs has indicated that if there's a blue wave, which means the Democrats take the White House as well as Congress, they actually would be upgrading their economic forecast for the U.S. And the reason that would be that they would have a higher probability, in their view, of the $2 trillion stimulus package being passed that the Biden administration, or a potential Biden administration, is outlining. And similarly, Moody's has come out and said they'd expect that a Biden plan versus a Trump plan at this stage would have 7.5, almost million more jobs created, and we would, in the States, get back to full employment by the mid-year 2022, which is 2 years earlier than under a Trump plan. But in sum, it all comes down to COVID.
With more than 7.8 million COVID-19 cases in the US, it's not surprising that the pandemic has emerged as the most pressing issue of the elections. And it's here that market watchers feel that Joe Biden has an edge over President Trump, even if it means potentially higher taxes, as Mr. Biden has promised.
Getting COVID under control is the number one thing that's going to help the U.S. economy shore itself up and then grow. And I think there's a universal recognition of that. And at the same time, what we've seen that's been interesting is that an increased recognition that if you do indeed collect higher taxes and you can put those into productive uses, for example, clean green energy and infrastructure and things that in the States people have said they've wanted for a long time, if you can translate those into jobs, then that has a long-term sustainability impact for the economy. So in the longer term, that actually may be more beneficial for investors as well.
Back in June, Morgan Stanley warned that investors were concerned about the impact of Trump tax breaks being rolled back by the Democrats. There were fears that this might affect investment and employment. But some market watchers say that many times candidates make pledges during a campaign that actually take a few years to materialize. And these tax changes could fall into that category.
You don't really want tax your businesses and consumer if the job recovery isn't coming through. Yes, that's on the card, but I would say I think they will be realistic in that if the economy cannot take higher tax, it won't come through, because it, as we've seen clearly, we don't have to look too far. Japan is a classic, is a nearest example where they unfortunately hiked consumption tax in October. So that added to the contraction, and obviously the pandemic outbreak sort of compounded the contraction. So I would say, even if we do see a blue wave swept through the White House, policy on the fiscal front, I think, will still be extremely calibrated.
Another issue that investors are keeping an eye on is the ongoing trade disputes between the US and China. While President Trump has escalated this to a new level, investors aren't expecting a Biden presidency to be soft on China either.
I don't think Biden is going to change, the approach towards China in a dramatic way. Where you could see big changes are his approach as far as trade policy is concerned. Trump has used tariffs, to rein China in, to threaten China. I think Biden might not do that. He's not in favor of, using tariffs. He thinks it's counterproductive. And, the markets have been affected by this trade war, tariff war. And so if Biden backtracks on the tariff front, I think that will be a source of relief for the markets.
Investors are also going to keep a close eye on the US dollar if the Democrats manage to win the presidency and the Senate, as some polls predict.
Then it is possible that Biden could, increase. He has the mandate to increase spending in a big way. although he may increase taxes, net, we see his fiscal agenda is reflationary. Now, if that happens, then it's possible that in the medium long term, investors' risk appetite will pick up. And when investors' risk appetite picks up, what happens typically is that the US dollar weakens, its appeal as a safe haven diminishes. So on that note, it is possible that a Biden victory, which leads to US dollar weakness, may lead to a recovery, or rather a pickup in emerging market Asian stocks, which have lagged the US stock market.
The one thing that all investors agree on is that they want to see stability return to the United States.
I think they are fairly uniform in terms of expressing the view that a Biden presidency perhaps brings greater stability to the world, less confrontational, and therefore, in one catch-all phrase, greater peace and harmony, which basically means from an asset standpoint, less risk, therefore more clarity in terms of a more coordinated response, perhaps to things like the pandemic as well.
No matter who wins on November the 3rd, the US system of checks and balances means that plans and policies need to be approved by Congress. Experts also agree that markets don't like uncertainty. So if there is no clear winner come November the 3rd, there's likely to be some volatility for the stock market.